will get us onto Facebook. Recording in progress, it says. Not Hazelmere Social, that wouldn't be right. So live. So we've got the usual, I know, Yvonne, you will know this all too well. When is it actually on Facebook? Let me just double check. And I'm usually there before I realize I am. Here we go. I think we are there. We are. We're here.
Lovely.
And it is still good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning, Yvonne, and good morning, everybody. I say good morning, and I know some of you, it'll be, the afternoon, the evening, and maybe the middle of the night because you've been woken up and you can't get back to sleep. Or you might be in a far-flung corner of the world because Yvonne is the most wonderful, wonderful person, and who wouldn't want to meet her and hear more?
Oh, bless you, bless you.
I'm really pleased to welcome you, Yvonne. I was just saying, we're in the middle of this week-long annual event where we're focusing on the early years, the 0 to 6s, and what it's like to have a child with additional needs, or maybe additional needs, because we don't really know. And I've just come off a conversation like this with a psychiatrist who we work with with our partner organizations. She's in the council and the health service. You know how these things get entangled. Yeah. But we were talking about parent well-being, and she ended by saying that, we parents are brave and magnificent. And I just thought Yvonne will love that, because that is so, it's in your ballpark. But what I love is that we've spoken to this fabulous lady who is a psychiatrist, and now we're coming to speak to you, and you are a mum, and yes, a brilliant one at that. And I think what is so wonderful about what you do is you are the epitome of lived experience, and how we can help other parents be parents.
Absolutely. What a lovely introduction. Yes. It's also really interesting that we're looking at the sort of the little ones. I remember those years so clearly. Toby was born with a syndrome that is so rare that he's the only person in the world who has it. And that has always made my job as his mother incredibly lonely. In those early years, we'd try to join this club and we'd be told, no, you don't miss the criteria, or we'd try to access that service. No, you don't miss the criteria. Because he was the only person in the world, of course, nothing was written around any criteria that we could fit. But those early years were so frightening, because for Toby, he had this syndrome that made him incredibly poorly, and he could become so frighteningly, life-threateningly unwell, literally at the drop of a hat. And looking back, those first 6-7 years, we were nearly always in hospital. And of course, I was always there as a resident parent, which completely fractures your family. I mean, I've got 2 other children, one older, one younger, but all very close together in age. And Toby, I lost count of the number of times that we were told he wouldn't make it for the next few hours, and I'd have to call the whole family. And where are we now? He's 27. And wow, he's doing incredibly well, but those early years are just so hard. And of course, a lot of the stuff that we have to deal with as parents was never in the baby books. No. We have to kind of almost make it up as we go along.
And I think worse than that almost is what's written in the baby books goes wrong and makes things worse. And so we're having to tear up the baby books, where the whole world around us is saying, no, this is the way you should do it.
Yes. Oh, I find that particularly, I better explain in case you don't know, the main focus of the work that I do is all around difficult and dangerous behaviour, particularly children who have an additional need or a disability, who become so incredibly anxious and overwhelmed that they lash out and hurt other people, often their own family members.
And I think if I can interrupt you really briefly, Yvonne, I think what's really important to say also here is that I think now this is something that society knows about a little bit and accepts happens. But that's largely, well, if not completely, thanks to you, isn't it? And you started talking about this about 4 years ago. And I remember we used to talk about it. Yvonne and I have known each other for a while. But you then went on and built something around it. And I think in that, as you introduce yourself and where you're going, it's really important to know what you're at and how your little organization, your organization Newbold
it's
Hope
tiny.
it's tiny, but it is having, and it's having such a huge impact on families of children with additional needs. And it's amazing.
Now,
so,
the thing is, why that is, it's work with are incredible. It's all I do is I say, try this. They're the ones that actually come online, meet up with me, this rather bonkers lady who's got some really weird ideas that they're never going to hear from anybody else in their circle. I say exactly the opposite to what their mother-in-law is telling them, or their neighbours are telling them, or the tut-tuts in the car park at Sainsbury's are telling them. And it's those parents who actually have the courage to listen to what I'm saying and to give it a go. And basically, we now, I'm talking all over the place, hold on a moment.
That's okay.
Where were we? Basically, when Toby, let me go back a little bit. Toby's first few years were by illness, and it was heart in mouth time. The number of times I just sort of watched him and just willed him to stay with us and just take one more breath at a time. Things were incredibly frightening. And then as his health stabilised a tiny bit, his behaviour went off the scale. And it was terrifying, absolutely terrifying. There were days when I would get up in the morning and I wouldn't know how I was going to get my 3 children safely to bed that evening. And sometimes I didn't manage it. Toby was, one of the things that he used to do was, because he has so many disabilities, he didn't learn to walk until he was 10. And he was so pleased that he was walking that he'd want to do really dangerous things like walk downstairs, whereas always before he'd bumped down on his bottom. Now, there was no way I was going to let him walk downstairs without actually being right in front of him, ready to catch him. So I'd walk down backwards, just in front of him. And one of the things he used to do quite often was to grab hold of my hair, pull it close to him, then kick me in the face so that I would be at the bottom of the stairs having fallen, and he'd be standing at the top of the stairs, incredibly pleased with himself because this was great fun, holding on to a whole chunk of my hair. Now, that was the sort of unpredictable behaviour that we were dealing with. And there were times when he went to a wonderful special school. He'd be brought home by taxi. There were times when I would be sitting on the bottom of the stairs just crying because I didn't know what the evening, when I was dreading him coming home, and that's no way to live. Yeah. I spoke to everybody on his team. He had an enormous team. We were under 14 different paediatric consultants. He was at a fantastic special school. Clifton Hill, actually, one of your schools in Surrey, because I don't live so far away. They were wonderful, but nobody saw this behaviour. And particularly among the medical professionals and from social services, I was given very clearly the impression that nobody had come across this before. Now, remember, this was 20 years ago. We didn't have the internet like we've got it now. The Facebook hadn't been invented. There weren't any Facebook groups or anything like that. And I was led to believe that we were the only family in the world.
We had the same experience.
Yeah. Plus, as well as that, when a child's behaviour becomes difficult, dangerous, and off the scale, everybody points the finger at mum. And slowly but surely, the narrative completely changed and it became my fault. And there's something really tough that happens when you're told so often that it's your fault and you're the only one, and that it's your fault and that you're the only one. That drip, 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 you absorb it, you take it on board, you start to believe it. And if your child is hurting you regularly, it's only a tiny, tiny step then, if you think that it's your fault, to start actually believing that you deserve it and that, you know, this is okay. And it's not okay. And it took us years, it took us 10 years to get the help that we needed. And basically, by the time we were finally referred to somebody, a specialist CAMS team, who actually understood behaviour in young people who had very severe learning disabilities. By the time we got there, Toby was 17 and a half. They nearly didn't want to take him because they didn't think they'd have long enough, because we were going to lose the service at the age of 18. But I begged, I pleaded, and they worked intensively with us, and they were fantastic. And basically, I'll always remember saying to this chap that came to our house, and he came at about 2:30, so he could have an hour with me before Toby got home, and then he was going to observe Toby. And I'll always remember, you know, I'd been so excited that finally we were getting somewhere. This man walked through the door, and I made him a cup of tea. I even bought Kit Kats. We had Kit Kats that day because I was so excited. And my first question was, right, okay, how can we change Toby's behaviour? How can we change Toby? How can we help get him to realise that this can't happen? And he said to me, I'm not here to change Toby's behaviour. I'm here to change your behaviour. Well, at that moment, I nearly opened the door and kicked him out. But actually, he was right. And he wasn't, I thought this was going to be more parent blame pouring on me. But no, it wasn't. He was totally on side, and he made it very, very clear that it was never my fault and it was never Toby's fault. But Toby has a learning disability with a cognitive level of 18 months to 2 years. He's non-verbal. We can't teach him, but Toby and I had a very close relationship. And if I change, we were like this. So if I change, what does Toby have to do? To continue that relationship, he had to change too. It was subtle, it took a few months, but basically, I'll tell you what it was all about. Everybody over those past sort of 10 years or so, everybody, when I say everybody, I mean everybody. Everyone in Toby's circle, his was involved with him, and our friends, all the so-called baby books or child rearing books, the armchair psychiatrists that seem to live in the Tesco car park that are ready with their butts and their waggy fingers, all of them told me that I was being too soft, that I was being too lazy, and that Toby needed a much firmer hand. So I was told to parent firmer and stricter and harsher, and I just had to go up and up and up and up and up. I had done everything I could, absolutely everything I could, and it hadn't worked. In fact, it had made him worse. But I didn't realise that this behaviour was rooted in anxiety. And as soon as nobody had even told me that there was another direction to go in. And as soon as this team showed me how to parent in the opposite direction, so instead of going up and up and up, we went down and down and down. I became kinder, more connected, more collaborative, more in tune with Toby. And the only way I can describe it is that magic happened, and incredibly quickly. We reached Toby's 18th birthday and we were able to have a party. You were there, weren't you?
I think I was, yes.
Yes, because Benedicte and I are old friends. We go back, well, nearly 10 years now, isn't it? Yes, yeah. 10 years. 10 years in a few months' time, yeah. But we had this amazing party with 200 people in a church hall. And 6 months beforehand, this was a young man that we hadn't been able to go out into the community with unless we had 3 adults with us because things were so dangerous. That is how quickly things changed. But I still thought that it was all my fault. And I still believed that, we were the only ones. So it was quite a shock some years later to discover that we weren't. And it was even more of a shock to realise that here we are 20 years later and there still aren't the services. There's still parents are not getting that help. But worse than that, the professionals who are tasked to support vulnerable families like ours, they get no training. They get no support. They have no understanding of the reasons why these behaviours happen. So they basically, the way they can help is by telling you that, well, you must be soft, you must be lazy, do it harder and harder and harder and harder and harder.
It is, the conversations are still around, you must put boundaries and structure and this, that and the other. And you're, no, go ahead.
Yeah, the thing is, if a child is behaving in dangerous and difficult ways because they're so anxious, how is taking the iPad away from them, when the iPad is what they often use to feel safer? How's that going to help? It's not. It's going to make them more confused, plus it's going to fracture their relationship with you, their parent. Yeah. So, there's so much inappropriate advice around. And I just try to sort of counter that as best I can in my little organisation.
And I think what you did was really amazing, and it's important, I think, to mention it because of the success that families have had when they followed in. So you've got this whole set of webinars and workshops. You started with workshops, didn't you? And I love the fact that you've got your background that has this stay curious, be kind, because it epitomizes what you do.
Thank you.
And we talk a lot, don't we? I've been to at least one of your workshops.
Yes.
And we talk about that being kind and the giving the child control, because that allows them to manage their anxiety much better, which is completely the opposite to
absolutely
what everybody else tells you. And we've already got some parents asking questions, so I'm going to get onto them. But so you started this, did you start it as a Facebook group, or was it the workshop?
Well, goodness me, here we go. We'll be talking until next Thursday, Benedict. You know what we're like when we get together?
We could, easy, yeah.
Okay, let's go right back to Toby's birthday. We had that party. It felt as though all our Christmases, all our birthdays were happening on the same day. Suddenly, our family was on track. Toby was delightful.
And he loves a party, doesn't he?
Oh, he's a party animal. He's our birthday and Christmas king. He absolutely is. So everything was together. We'd got through. We'd been told so often that he wasn't going to survive past early childhood. He was never expected to make it to adulthood. He was a grown-up. To happen. Plus, we'd managed to sort behaviour out. And the thing is, parents now tell me when they manage to do it, they never say, oh, look, I haven't got any black eyes. Oh, look, I haven't got any bruises. Do you know what they say, Benedicte? And this is just so lovely. They say, thank you for making my child happy. And that's what it's all about, because happy children generally don't need to hurt or cause any, they don't need to behave in difficult or dangerous ways because they're happy. Their needs are being met. But anyway, basically, a few days after that, I was diagnosed completely out of the blue with bilateral breast cancer. And it was a huge, huge shock. It was totally unexpected. It came from my very first routine mastectomy.
Mammogram.
So I mean, mammogram, sorry, wrong word. I did have a mastectomy, but that was later.
Yeah.
I'd managed to catch cancer twice, completely unrelated, just bad luck at the same time. So I had to have all the treatment. We got to the end of treatment and there was more bad news. Basically, the treatment hadn't caught it. The cancer had progressed. And at that point, because of Toby, I had to make some pretty difficult decisions. And I had to push them and say, look, how long are we looking at here? And then if I was really lucky, if I stayed on treatment, I might have as long as 2 years, but we're probably looking at months rather than years. So there were some pretty difficult decisions to make, but that day I made myself a commitment. I needed a bucket list, and I thought, whatever time I have left on this planet, I want to do whatever I can to help and improve the quality of life of the next generation of children that are coming up behind Toby.
Told you she was awesome.
So that's what I've been doing ever since. But of course, I thought I was only going to be doing it for a few months because I didn't think I was going to be around very long. But nobody quite knows what's happened or why. I'm still on long-term treatment, but I'm also still here 9 years later. And first thing I did was I wrote a book, and then the book went a bit viral and it became an Amazon #1 bestseller, which was totally unexpected. So people then started emailing me, could I talk at this conference? Could I work with NHS England on this project? Could I do this? Could I do that? So the workshops started and people asked me to train, and I still wasn't really talking much about Toby's behaviour because I didn't want to bring all that shame, blame and judgment on my head. And then I was invited in onto Radio 4's Woman's Hour, and Jane, you remember that? Jane asked me a question, and the answer just tumbled out. It wouldn't have been authentic if I hadn't answered it properly. So I started talking quite openly about those awful years of Toby's violence. And afterwards, we were contacted by hundreds of people across social media. And that was the day I realised that I wasn't the only one, that this was a far, far, far larger problem than had ever been acknowledged. And I had to do something. I was getting email after email of the most harrowing, awful, terrible stories they were heartbreaking. I was awake at night worrying about these families. And also what was really, really difficult was the number of families who had lost their children simply because our statutory services, our public sector services have no training. And if a child is hitting out, then sometimes assumptions are made that it's basically children or parents are abusive as well, which just 0.9% of cases is just not the case at all. And everyone was telling me, all these emails and messages were telling me that they'd knocked on every door, they'd tried to get help, and everyone, they just hadn't been able to. And I couldn't turn my back on this huge group of people. So I did something that was a bit bonkers. And I said, right, let's have a conference. Now, I knew nothing about organising events or conferences or anything. And I also said, let's have it in 4 weeks' time. And it happened. And we brought these people into the room and it was electric. at one point I said, right, could people put their hands up if you've ever been hit by your own child? And virtually every hand went up in the room. And I said, right, okay, everybody keep your hand up and stand up and learn around and look at the room. Well, people started hugging, people started crying. The sense of relief that we weren't the only ones was palpable. And at the end of that day, I said, look, I think we need to stay in touch. And I thought it was only going to be the 120 families that were in the room. I never expected it to be where we are now, where we're probably going to make 10,000 in the next few weeks, which is quite incredible. But I've also since found some research, there isn't much research in this, but the tiny bits of research I have dug up indicate that if a child has got an additional need or a disability at some stage throughout their childhood or young personhood, their anxiety levels will reach such high levels that they are likely to be aggressive towards other people. And the rates are about 50%. Wow. And yet every parent who deals with this is made to believe that it's their fault. And that's just not fair at all. And we're working towards that. So basically I was running workshops, and then of course after the conference I started developing workshops in how to reduce difficult and dangerous behaviour. And then of course the pandemic happened. Now I've been running these workshops for about 2.5 years or so, and they were very successful. And Malcolm, my other half, was driving me all around the country. We were doing one a month in London, near Waterloo, at the Waterloo Action Centre as well. And on a good day, we'd get 30 people there. And they were lovely because, you know, they were the days we were allowed to hug each other, and it was just a wonderful atmospheres, bringing people together and making them feel okay, and that this, not only is it okay, but this will get better. We can do things. There are things you can do. And then the pandemic happened, and I didn't want to go online at first because I was thinking, this is really hard because somebody could be alone, isolated in their kitchen. And we're going to be talking about these really, really difficult things. Is it responsible to leave them alone with those awfully difficult, heavy emotions? But I also saw in the group that I was running, and I still am running, the despair, the despondency. I mean, our community at lockdown, overnight, families lost their school places, they lost their respite, they lost their after school clubs, they lost their carers, they lost every single service, therapy, everything. They were left on their own. Now, if you have a child who is difficult and dangerous, those situations that we were hearing about in the group behind closed doors were devastating to read.
And the children lost all their routines, so their anxiety just went sky high.
It was an awful time. So I thought, right, okay, jump in, let's do it. So I tentatively did one webinar, and it was such a success that I've now done 250 webinars. And also the great thing about the webinars is that we've had time to kind of look at lots of different aspects. So altogether, I now run webinars on 16 different aspects of behaviour-related topics. And a large part of that is helping parents feel good about themselves. Because unless you feel good about yourself, you're not going to be able to help your child. If you're broken and crushed, you won't have the resources, you're not going to have the resilience, you're not going to have the energy levels. But there's a dichotomy there as well, because if there's a lovely saying that says a mother is only as happy as their least happy child. And I think all of us feel terribly guilty about looking after ourselves or putting our needs first if there's anything else at all that we could be spending that time with that might help a child. And when you have a child with additional needs or a disability, the to-do list is so flipping long. And people used to say to me, oh, you've got to look after yourself. And I used to get so cross because I used to think, well, how can I do that? Have they not seen my to-do list? And it just felt like another chore to stick at the end of it. And it was just awful. So I couldn't do that. Basically, Malcolm, you know Malcolm, my other half, he's a clinical hypnotherapist, and he also has done a lot of work in teaching people how to do mindfulness and how to do meditation. So he and I used to worry when we were doing the workshops. He and I used to get in the car. He used to say to me, he looks like you used to look when I first met you, because Malcolm came on the scene, childhood, and he said they all look as broken and as crushed and as, sorry, I need to cough, sorry. Sorry about that.
I think that's fine.
So I said to him, right, I've got a job for you to do. I want you to see if you can come up with easy peasy little ways that parents can self-care, look after themselves, touch base with themselves, reflect. That doesn't take more than 2 minutes. And he's come up with 20, 30 different ways that we now teach as well. Because I used to think that self-care was a luxury, but it isn't, it's essential, because you're not going to be, you can't run on empty. For your child what they need, if you're biting back the tears, or if you're very angry, or if you're carrying around those negative emotions, you will be life's going to be far easier if you can find a way to meet at least some of your needs and to be at least sometimes happy. So, you know, that's sort of our philosophy. So I've got lost. Where was I? Ask me another question.
Yeah, no, I think it's kind of what I want to say, I suppose, is there are a couple of things that you said there. And you said that when people follow your workshops and try the techniques, the strategies that you suggest, they will come back and say, thank you for making my child happy. The bit that you forgot is I see quite a lot of these, that the responses in the group, and I would say that your most common answer is, but you did it, you made your child happy.
Yeah. Yes.
And what I know you, so I'm very fortunate, but I also know that people are going to be listening and seeing this astonishing, amazing woman who has turned her life around, but also the lives of thousands of families. And I think it's probably important for me to kind of dash all of, I love Yvonne to pieces, and I put her on a pedestal, she's awesome, but actually she's very ordinary. And there is nothing that Yvonne has done that you can't do with your child. And we were talking about what we wanted to talk about. I've got loads of questions from you coming in, and I'm actually going to do a blanket. So just so you know, Yvonne, we've got parents asking, how do I keep my child's siblings safe? How can I plan Christmas?
Oh, right, brilliant. Right, okay. Can I talk about, oh, I can't hear you, sorry.
Yeah, no, go.
Yeah, okay, right, okay. We've got so many plans. Hopefully I'm going to be, if I can get it all done in time, most Christmases, in fact every Christmas, I do a specific how to have a happy family Christmas. When there's a behaviour, when there's a child with an additional need, how to keep the brothers and sisters happy. So I haven't announced the date, and I'm not sure I'm going to be doing it, but if I don't do it, I will be releasing a pre-recorded one that people can watch. Okay, so Christmas is something that I think is the hardest time of the year for our families, and in our group it's always the week between Christmas and New Year that's the most heartbreaking to read posts, because all of us as parents, we're conditioned to use Christmas as that benchmark to prove to our children that we love them, and we spend loads of money, we spend loads of time, we tear ourselves inside out producing the very best possible Christmas that we can. And then our child can't cope, and it all goes horribly wrong. And it's terribly hard to separate that distress that your child is feeling without taking it personally and feeling that they are rejecting you. And it's heartbreaking. It's utterly heartbreaking. You know,
So
the
I
worst.
think, what I wanted to say is, I think this feels like a really important session for our members to get to know you more than anything else.
Oh.
Because you are a parent, because you've been where they are, you've got 3 children with a range of additional needs, which gives you personal experience. And then you've got this, it's almost like your foster mum to all of the parents in your group in a lot
They
of ways.
call me auntie sometimes.
So you have this wealth of experience, but at the same time, I know that you've been developing amazing resources. And I think what's really important is a lot of the resources that parents find that aren't within services, because services can't handle complicated things very well. You'll be asked to spend 30, 50 pounds for a ticket for something. And you've worked so hard, haven't you, to make the resources that you have accessible.
Yes.
And I think that's really, really important to know that the help that you're looking for by logging on here and saying here, you're not going to get it right now this minute, although I suspect Yvonne will come up with a few nuggets of what you can do right now. But what we can do is say, look, this is a lady who is doing some phenomenal long-term work, and we're going to signpost you to her website. And there you're going to find, I suspect, all of the answers you're looking for, because she's really comprehensive.
Right. The thing is, we are incredibly lucky. Can I talk about the Facebook thing? Because that's so exciting.
Yes.
Right. As you know, we run a Facebook group. And in the world, there are 620 million Facebook groups. But Facebook themselves wanted to work with a handful of groups globally who they feel are making a huge social impact and changing the world for good. And it was an incredibly competitive selection process, but Newbold Hope is one of only 10 UK groups that have been taken on by Facebook, and they are working it's hard work, but they are working so closely with us, and they've actually been I'm getting very high level business mentoring and coaching from an organisation called Founders Intelligence. We're getting some funding so that we can afford to do things like update our website and those sort of things that were just completely beyond our reach. And we're also getting very high level training. And what they've actually shown me is that over the last year and a half, I have done all these webinars, and I either charge £2.50 or £4, and we gave an awful lot of tickets away for free if people couldn't afford it. Now, that was great, and it was a fantastic strategy during the pandemic when people were really struggling. But what it's done is it's run me into the ground because I'm exhausted. And on those, running the whole sort of all the subscriptions, the software, running this whole caboodle costs an absolute fortune. So what I desperately need is staff. I'm living with a terminal diagnosis. If this is going to move into the long term so we can still be helping people in 20, 30 years' time, wouldn't it be wonderful if your kids can grow up, have children, and if those children are having these problems, they can still reach out to us? So basically, with Facebook's help, we are now looking at lots and lots of different ways of doing things. We're going to be creating, designing lots and lots of online courses that anybody can, because up until now, if you wanted to go to, say, the self-esteem webinar, you'd have to wait until I had time to put another date on, and it was a bit frustrating. So we're going to be launching a new website very, very soon. literally days away, hopefully. Benedicte's already had a sneak peek of it, haven't you? So, and we're hoping to, over the next 3 or 4 months, add more and more courses and things that people can buy anytime. We're also going to be opening a membership type of site, which is like a club. We're thinking of calling it the Behaviour Detectives Club. And basically, with a webinar, I chat for 2 hours and then I say, bye then. And you're on your own trying to remember what I said and implement it all on your own. And for some people, that's not enough. I feel that a lot of parents need far more hand-holding than that. So we're going to have a club where parents who actively want to help their child's behaviour can join. And we will be sharing all the materials in there, but we'll break them down into bite size. Right, okay, let's try this one today, or what do you think of that one, or have you tried this one? So there's something that somebody's tried something and it hasn't worked, they can come in and say, I didn't work, so that then we can suggest, well, try it this way or try it that way, or maybe that one isn't the right one, maybe try this strategy. So we'll be able to give much, much more ongoing support and help. And obviously these are all going to have to be paid for. So we're going to also be trying to get funding and sponsors. And what we're looking at, if they can pay for 2 places or even pay a little bit more. But eventually what we're hoping to do is to move towards the social prescribing model, so that you can go to your GP, say, look, my child is this, and they can prescribe year's membership or whatever. But obviously that's long-term plans. As well as that, we're having a conference on the 2nd of April where we're going to bring people together and professionals together to actually look at how far we've come, but where we still need to go. And I think that's going to have a little bit of a theme on, hang on, you know, we need to treat parents better, we need to trust them more, we need to stop blaming them. We need to make them feel good about themselves because their children need happy parents.
And it comes back, one of the phrases that you use a lot with parents is this phrase of you are a ninja parent. We've just got to help you find that ninja parent inside of you.
Oh, absolutely. And it's actually quite hilarious, really. I mean, there's a huge irony. There you are with a child who is behaving in very difficult ways in the Tesco car park. And you've suddenly got an audience and they're all looking at you. They are watching you, they are tutting, they're feeling smug. But actually, who is the advanced parent here? Who is the parent who is used to being on hyper alert day and night? Who's used to lurching from one crisis management situation to the next, who's constantly firefighting at home, who is diving in to prevent a sibling from getting injured?
Who notices all of those, the micro signs that things are going to explode, and you're able to actually divert the problem.
Yeah, and that actually takes a lot of practice. I remember those micro signs building up and I didn't have a clue what to do for many years, and I just knew, oh my goodness, it's going to get worse. But at least I could try and protect the other 2 or try and keep things safe and what have you. But the thing is, you guys absolutely rock. You guys have parenting skills already that would leave most people standing. You can do things that other parents don't even know is a thing.
Yeah.
So the irony that they're the ones standing there judging, you know, actually quite things. I mean, I've been there. You're so embarrassed that you're trying very hard to keep the audience calm. Whereas actually you've lost them. They're never going to be your best friend. They're never, ever going to be on a Christmas card list. They've already judged you. They're going to tell everybody they meet today, about everybody they meet this week about, oh, there was this family in the car park. The thing is, there's nothing you can do to change that, but what you can do is you can focus on your child. And right then, you have a choice. Do you keep the audience happy that are going to be judging you anyway? Or do you just turn your back on them, close your mind down and completely focus on your child? And if you have to say anything at all, find a phrase and rehearse it loads and loads of times before, outside of that situation. One thing that I found helpful was my child isn't being naughty. He's very frightened at the moment, so please can you give us some space? And it was sort of quite short, quite sweet, and it didn't always work, but at least I felt I'd done something or said something. And
I found I used to do something similar, but I used to find that actually if I took my attention away from that child, even for a millisecond, that was dangerous. So I used to find myself saying with a reasonably loud voice, so I'd project, I'd say, oh, hon, you're feeling really frightened, aren't you? And trying to name that emotion helped him, but it was also a way of
a message
for the naysayers and as you say, the tutters. And it's really interesting because you get different kinds of tutting and murmuring in the background, but you've at least been able to stand up for yourself and
for your child.
It's a way to say, I know I'm right. I know that he is scared.
Yes.
And that's what matters.
They don't have to believe it. That's fine. But you're probably never going to see them again. And if you're embarrassed, don't go back to Tesco, go to Sainsbury's the next week.
I love that. That feels like a really important nugget, doesn't it? Is find that sentence that you feel comfortable with.
Yes.
That allows you to then focus on the stuff that you know you need to do. And
own it as well. So basically let people know that you're in charge, that you know what you're doing. So
just amazing. The Facebook thing is really impressive. As I say, we've talked a few times about the fact that we know each other, and I've seen you pour your heart and soul into this work, and it's astonishing. And it's you were talking about your health, and nobody knows why you're still here, and you kind of have to wonder, well, maybe is it this work that you have, that the passion that drives you forward, and at the same time, please look after yourself.
Oh, yes. I'm great at telling people to look after themselves. But the thing is, though, the difference between what I'm doing now is that I absolutely love this work. It's the most rewarding thing I've ever done. And we're now getting at least 10 messages of thanks every single day. Since the pandemic, we actually know more than 1,000 children who are no longer violent because their parents came to one of our webinars. Now, it's probably more than 1,000, but these are the parents who've actually told us. Plus, there are countless others who may have significantly reduced their violence, so that instead of having violent episodes 3 or 4 times a day every day, and lasting for an hour or more, it now happens once every 3 or 4 months, and it lasts for 5 minutes.
And I think what you're teaching parents, and we had a really a lovely question that really tugged at my heartstrings for one of our other speakers, and this, I think it was a mum, was saying, how do we deal with the underlying fear of what our child's future will be like? Will they find themselves treated in the appalling stories that we hear in the news?
Yeah.
I think what's really interesting about the way that you work with families and you steer them, don't you? You don't do things for them. You just give them guidance. And when we, as these ninja parents, can help our children come down and de-escalate and find who they truly are rather than this ball of anxiety, actually we reduce the risk of that kind of thing happening to them in the future, don't we? So as parents, we actually have far more power and far more agency than we believe we do a lot of the time.
Absolutely. And a lot of it is that we're kind of conditioned to believe that the professionals have all the answers. But
Yes.
actually, they don't have the lived experience. And what was interesting in the group at this weekend, I was doing a completely different exercise for the partner organisation. I was helping them with a bit of a favour. And I was asking parents, who would you go to if you needed help? Which organisations? And there was a long, long list, and only 2 of them were what I would call established organisations that everybody would hear of. Every single other organisation that they mentioned was one of the weeny, teeny, tiny little organisations like mine that are run by other parents that get it. Lots and lots of Facebook groups and things.
Yeah.
I don't think that the public sector services have caught up with this trend, but there's a definite trend whereby parents are putting their trust in people that have actually lived it and have a different type of answer. So I think that we're going to be seeing a shift in the way that parents actually seek help. And one of the things I always say in a lot of the workshops and the webinars and the online training that I do is that actually nobody is coming to help you. I have a picture of a knight in shining armour on horseback. And the thing is, we all wait for somebody to come in to sort it out for us. But Toby was recognised in our borough at the time as being a child with such extreme behaviour that he was off the scale. And we couldn't get help. There was no help. There is no help. There is some, but it will take a very, very long time. And even if Boris Johnson was to walk into Parliament tomorrow and put as much money into difficult and dangerous behaviour as has put into COVID, it would still take 5 to 10 years to build the infrastructure, enough staff and the societal attitudes to allow this to happen. Our kids don't have 5 to 10 years. They've got us, and we're better than 5 to 10 years.
I think that's it, isn't it? Is we often find ourselves in that trap of feeling angry because the services should exist. And so we rant and we rail, and actually maybe that energy is best spent realizing that we have the ability to do,
we can skill up.
Work.
Yeah, we can skill up. But the other thing, going back to the work that I'm doing, is I am very, very clear that I don't ever want the work that I do to have any barriers due to affordability. So on our website, we will still always have enough information for people to get started and to really make a difference. And we will also, in our group, that if anyone has, we only accept people into our group if your child has actually been violent towards somebody else. That could be you, it could be a brother or sister, it might be at school. The reason for that is that our community gets very blamed and judged. And if he does lash out, we get blamed and judged most, even by other people within the same community. So we only, but if you are in that category, please join. And yes, there is so much exclusive information that's not available outside of that group that, again, there is enough for you to make a huge and significant difference without having to spend even a penny on any of the things that we're doing. But by having these more in-depth courses and the club like that, it means we will be able to build in sustainability, and we will be able to afford salaries so that we can build a team, because I am living with a terminal diagnosis.
I think one of the things, that I'm really keen, I suppose, to in our work together is obviously Family Voice work with Surrey local authority, and we talk about, you know, the idea of social prescribing and training for parents. It comes up a lot, and so we regularly will promote people like Yvonne, who we know get phenomenal results, but we need to allow parents to have access to that. And actually, it's going to be far cheaper for a local authority to sponsor a parent and to provide that with lived experience, with stuff. You've got this amazing track record now of families who've really managed to turn things around. And part of that is helping the public sector realise the value of working in these different ways, isn't it?
And what's lovely is more and more I'm doing work with staff teams, particularly in schools, and I've done a lot of work speaking at psychiatry conferences. And in the early days, it was like, what does she know? She's a mum. That was, they never actually said it, but that was very much the attitude that I picked up. Whereas now, it's really good because they want to listen too. And we even now have a Facebook group for professionals.
Oh, great.
So, yeah, and we've also got a separate one for dads as well, so that they can talk amongst themselves, because I think that's sometimes important, because their voices often get lost in all of this. So did you say you've got questions? Do you want to?
You know, I was looking at all the questions, and I'm looking at the clock, which is running very out. I think that, so the questions that are there are really about, they're answered in all of the work that you do in your webinars and in your things on Webline. So we've had, you know, how can I keep my child's sibling safe?
I'll give you one tip for that.
Yeah.
Just, I mean, there are 1,000 tips that I do in the webinars that I do about this, but I would say the most important thing is validate your child. If your child has been hurt by their brother or sister and they come to you and they whinge, often as parents, we don't like anybody, even our own children, being horrible about our other children. And often we shut them down and we say, well, look, Johnny can't help it. He's got a disability. But actually, right then, that child is hurt. That child needs to feel heard. That child needs to know that they matter too. So listen and say, look, I'm really sorry that this happened. You must feel really bad. Explore their feelings with them in the moment, even though that can be quite painful for us. So let your children know that you take it seriously, that it is unfair, and they've got an absolute right to be angry or cross or whatever.
Could I have, I like this one tip notion, Yvonne, this is brilliant. How about one Christmas tip?
One Christmas tip, okay. I would say that several weeks before Christmas, even now, sit down and work out and just keep asking yourself, does it really matter if? Lower your expectations. Work out as well. You can draw little boxes on a piece of paper and actually put every person in your family's name at the top, and then work out what's important to that person for Christmas, what matters. There might be one child that gets really excited about a tree, but it might be the tree and the smell of the tree and the flashing lights that really upset another child. So where can you put the tree? Why not be unconventional and have that tree in the brother or sister's bedroom, and even have the present opening in the bedroom or something? Think outside the box. We don't have to do it Hollywood style. And also, when you see a Hollywood Christmas, they don't really exist. They were probably filmed in June. And none of the so-called family are even related to each other. So work out what matters. Work out as well, not what would make, how do I do a conventional Christmas? Because I think a lot of us go into Christmas, we just hold our breath and we know that we have to do this, we have to have a tree, we have to have presents, we have to do this, we have to do that, because otherwise it doesn't count as
Christmas.
Doing Christmas. So it's just lovely to take it, let yourself off the hook and do Christmas in a really special way that suits your family.
I
So
like
work-
it doesn't matter if for a number of years when things were really tricky, we had one of our children spent Christmas and a week around Christmas with the grandparents. So we actually split the family, and it was hard and it was heartbreaking to make that decision, but it worked. And then we'd get together after Christmas and we got over that really tricky bit. So it doesn't matter if is lovely.
But the other thing as well is, and sometimes the simplest of simplest things work. At the dining table, have one of those, get your paper or plastic tablecloths, disposable tablecloths, but get lots of them so that they can drape right down to the floor. Because then what you're doing is you're creating a little den where if a child needs to escape or just needs to hide away, if they want to, they don't have to go upstairs to their own bedroom. They can just hide away, but still be part of the family day with no pressure. Let them choose whether they want that or not. But create a little tent under the table. That could lovely. Really work. Yeah. You know, it's just in the Christmas thing I do, I come up with must be nearly 100 of these little tricks of the trade that I've learned the hard way through the years. But yeah.
And so we've got a lot of questions about links to, for example, the dad's group. So we'll make sure that we get all of that on there.
Sent Lisa most of the links, but I didn't. I mean, the problem is I'm involved in so many different things that the links go on for ages. So if anybody wants a specific link, please message me on one of the Facebook pages or something, and we'll make sure that we get it for you. You know, anything that we could do to help. Yeah.
Fantastic. I think it feels like that given the time of year, ending with that Christmas tip feels like a really good plan. I will, if there are any other specific things, Yvonne, could I send you any questions that we haven't covered?
Of course. Or if you were up to it, if you wanted to do a follow-up in a week or two, then we might be able to do something like that. Because I know you do you do a lot online. You do Facebook Lives. Well, I'd be happy to do one with you. If
wonderful.
That
well, it might have to be after Christmas now because they're all getting very booked up. But thank you so much for the offer. And it's always just such a joy to speak to you. So we don't get to have chats, but you know, this is our friendship happening right now.
I know it's really sad. Anyone who's watching, Benedicte and I are actually very so busy because we do these online things that we never actually get to say hello, which is really sad. So look, it's been an absolute joy to spend time with you, Benedicte. Thank you so much for inviting me.
That's a pleasure. Thank you so much for the time you've taken, and I'm so excited to see what happens as a result of this Facebook Accelerator program. And we're going to put all of the links, and I know you've also now got an Instagram account, which is beautiful and lovely.
Yes. We've got company colours, we've got, you know, they've helped us brand, and my colleague Amanda is doing fantastic things on the Instagram account. Brilliant. Although she nags me. Have you done another video, Yvonne? Because I do little 1-minute videos. Yeah. But so, you know, but she's been absolutely fantastic with that. So big shout out to Amanda Panda and also to Snow Robinson, who the two of them, I couldn't do anything that I managed to do without their huge amount of support and their love behind the scenes. They are wonderful.
And I think I'm going to close by first of all saying thank you as ever, but also talking to all of you who are here, particularly if you're younger parents. I know because I've seen parents listen to Yvonne and they come away kind of awestruck. And she is awesome, but she is no less awesome than you are. No. And she has experience, she has tips and tricks, she's been doing this a while, and there is so much to learn from her. But the biggest lesson, I think, is that what you can learn is how amazing a parent you are and you can be.
You know it all here already. We just help you gain a bit of confidence to use it, that's all.
Brilliant. So, thank you so much, Yvonne. I will press all my stops.